Hey guys, here today with another Shirogorov knife review. This one is on the 110 Kickstop, which is a collaboration with Lee Williams and Sergey Shirogorov on Sergey's 110 model, which of course is named very similarly to the F95 and the 111, where the blade length of the model is 110 millimeters. Now, this knife actually, the 110, came out quite a long time ago, quite a few years ago. That model actually was an axis lock model with composite material scales, either G10 or carbon fiber scales on the sides of the knife. And really, I think this is one of the reasons why Sergey chose to use this model in the collaboration. Now, it's completely my theory, but I think that, moving from an axis lock knife with handle scales to a full titanium frame lock with Lee Williams' famous Kickstop mechanism would show a very marked improvement in the design, and very much a lot of this knife has changed and been modernized, and there's a lot of features that we've seen in more recent knives being introduced into the 110. So it's really a great refresh to the model, which we will go in depth here in this video today. Now, a little bit more about this project. There are 3 models available. There's the sapphire blue, which you see here, the amber brown, and the anchor gray. Now, all these models are titanium frame locks. They have the same blade finish. The only thing that differs is the hardware. They're all titanium hardware, but this one, of course, is sapphire blue. You have the clip, the screws, the back spacer, and the pivot collar. On the amber brown, you have that same hardware, but just in a brown finish. And on the anchor gray model, they're gray, of course. And so it's really cool to see these Lottos being done in different variants. The last time that happened, I believe, was the cannabis with Sienkiewicz. And that was a long time ago. So it's really cool to see some more options, and also it means that there are more knives being made, which is great for anybody who is a collector who wants to enter the lotto and win. So it's really great to see that the knife is being offered in more variants and at an increased amount. So let's go over the specs of the knife. Now, again, the knife being 110, very similar to the 111, just 1 millimeter shorter, is a very big knife. And let's take a look compared to some models, right? We have a F95 or F7, which you can see how much longer this is. And stacking it up against a neon size knife, you can see just how long that is. And it's a big knife. I have small, medium, small size hands, and definitely is sizable. Take a look, with an F95 size knife, the 110 is a very big knife. But it handles very well. The knife is internally skeletonized, so again, like all Shirogorov knives, you won't have any problems with weight, at least in my opinion. Let's take a look at the actual length. The length of the knife with the handle closed is just a bit over 5.5 inches. So again, taking a look at the knife open, you can see that this knife is quite big open. We're looking at almost 10 inches, around 9 7/8. And taking a look at the blade, it says 110 millimeters, but we're actually taking a look and figuring that that's just a little bit over 4.5 inches of actual cutting edge. So quite a big knife, really, no matter how you put it. And when you stack it up against the other knives in the Shirogorov lineup, you can see that it's definitely a large one. Now, taking a look at the actual blade itself, you can see here that the blade steel here is S90V, so very high-end steel that's used on custom divisions, the higher end knives that the factory produces. The blade has the standard fine stonewash finish that you see on some custom divisions, just a little bit finer than what's used on the production run. The flats of the blade are sand finished, and you have quite a bit of area here to show off that sand finish. The workshop does an amazing job with the sand finishing. So again, same thing as what you'd see here on this knife. Nothing too new here, but it's great to see just a wide area to showcase that satin finish. Now the logo on this knife or the logos, since it's a collaboration with Lee Williams, are deeply etched. It's not the normal laser engraving, as you can see. So this is some deep laser engraving. As you can see, the logo has some depth to it, which is really nice. Same thing as well on the Lee Williams logo and the Kickstop text. Very deep engraving. Now this blade profile is quite unique. I feel like it definitely has some characteristics that you would see in some of Lee Williams' knives, and also some elements, as you can see, from Sergey's designs as well. It's very interesting. It's very long, flat, straight edge with a very minimal belly up until the last third of the knife. And the knife has a very long swedge that appears from pretty much the very edge, the very tip, all the way back to, right where the handle begins. So you have a very long swedge that gives it a very aggressive look. The knife also has traditional style F95 jimping, which personally, while some people might find it a little bit plain, since that's really what's offered on the production knives as well, I think it's very functional. What you see here on some of the newer knives, especially like the Neon Zero, is this very wide jimping that looks really cool, but really doesn't provide much grip at all. So having that older style jimping that you see on the older knives, like this Hati here, gives you something really functional, then something that you can actually grip. So it's a really nice touch, I think, and goes really well with this blade. If you check here, there actually is enough room in the choil area to sharpen it properly without hitting the plunge grind. Very nice design choice, and I think that was something that was very deliberate to make sure that this knife can be sharpened without damaging the plunge grind area. So moving on, taking a look at the middle of the knife, we have, of course, the Kickstop mechanism, and this is really, again, the namesake of the knife. One of the big reasons that this knife can be considered a Lee Williams collaboration is because it has that kickstop mechanism. So what is a kickstop? The kickstop is a mechanism that basically a folding flipper tab that folds away when the knife is deployed, and when the blade is closed, the handle kind of pops back up. So if you take a look here at the flipping action, you can see that there's no flipper tab that protrudes on the bottom of the knife. So it gives a really clean look to the knife. But as you can see here, when the knife folds, the kickstop kind of folds back up, and it's ready for you to flip again. Now, what this means is you have a mechanism that is two pieces, right? You have the actual flipper tab itself that is separate from the actual blade. And this flipper tab piece has basically its own track to ride in. So if you actually take a look at the knife, half open like this, the flipper tab will flop around. And basically, it's flopping around when you flip it. When you flip the knife open, it'll come into its final resting position where it locks in. And then the blade of the knife uses that flipper tab basically as the stop pin. So the flipper tab piece and stop pin basically ride around on the inside and act as, again, the stop pin and the flipper tab. So really ingenious design. A lot of people are very impressed with it. Lee Williams is very humble about it. He says, once you understand exactly how it works, it's a very simple design. And I think that's definitely a good thing. It's very innovative. It's very interesting. I think when you think about it, it's one of those things where you think like, oh, well, why didn't I think about that? But when you actually see the execution, seeing how simple it is, it's very good to know that, it's in a mechanism that really isn't prone to breaking. It's not super complicated or anything like that. It's just, very good engineering. So it's really cool to see that here. Again, and this is what really makes it a Lee Williams collaboration. Now, moving on to the handle, we have, again, just a normal titanium, the darkened titanium finish that Sergey uses on their knives. This handle has silk milling across the entire length of it, except on these, machined, lowered areas on the handle. So you have that silk milling that you see on like the F5 silk and other knives. Taking a look here, we have the accents of the knives. Again, this is the sapphire blue model. So we have a anodized blue pivot collar, anodized blue screws, and a anodized blue clip and back spacer. And the clips on the sapphire blue and the amber brown version are actually satin finished. The anchor gray, I believe, is just a stonewash finish. Then anodized gray, but on the blue and brown versions, you actually have a satin finish clip, which I think really is the first time that I've seen this, maybe on a non-custom model. Even Custom Vision, I don't think has a finish like this. And it's really amazing. I think this is one of the things that makes the knife really pop out. As you can see here, it really catches the light, in various angles, and is excellently finished. Taking a look back, here's an example of some blue that you would see on like a Custom Division knife. As you can see, it's this clip has definitely been tumbled before, being anodized blue, and it has that matte finish that you would expect to see on blue anodized piece. So again, really nice touch here, I think that they did, and I'm really glad that they did that. It's really definitely something new and refreshing to see. It definitely does make the knife kind of a scratch magnet. Any scratches on this end would definitely be visible though. But again, that makes the gray option very suitable if you were intending to carry this knife. Moving on to the clip. I think the clip is actually very reminiscent of the old style Neons. Now the Neon Zero definitely has a new design, but this clip definitely reminds me of the traditional Neon clip, which I think is a good thing. Never really understood why people didn't like that clip. It actually has very decent retention, and like the older style F3s and the 111 clip, there is actually a recess in the handle as well to make pocketing the knife in and out a bit easier as well. So really nice touch. Again, this knife looks simple, but when you actually go ahead and take a look at some of the faceting work that's done to it, you can see a lot of thought has been put into the clip design. And I actually even noticed that, it's kind of hard to get on camera, but if you take a look here, the clip on the inside is actually skeletonized. Sergey went to great lengths when designing this clip to really showcase their machining skills. Now moving on to the lock bar, you can see that this has Lee Williams' signature, slots on the lock bar. So instead of having some lock bar milling, like, for example, say this, or, this, or, on the old style knives, having that relief on the inside, having this slot style lock bar relief is a really cool touch, and I really only see Lee doing it in this style. The slots actually come up past the lock bar and onto the main part of the handle as well, on the curved cap portions of the slots. So I think it's a really nice design touch as well. It definitely could have just ended on the lock bar, but having it move up onto the main portion of the handle, I think is a really cool design touch as well. Moving on forward, you can actually see the lock bar insert screw has a raised portion here. Really interesting design. I've seen it a lot on the Neons as well. As you can see, there's something very similar on the Neon. Really always wondered why, Sergey decided to have this very unique polygonal, raised area on the lock bar insert. But I don't know. That's really cool. I really can't describe it. The screw for the lock bar is not really blind screwed. It kind of has the very end of it open. Really, I think they're just trying to showcase how beautifully finished this lock bar insert screw is. It's just perfectly turned. So I actually like seeing it as well. I think having it showing like that is, again, just another showcasing of the level of finishing that this knife has. Again, so you're taking a look at the handle, you can see that this knife has ball dimpled milling on both the top and the bottom and the front and the back of the knife. Now, these are really cool design touches. They add just a little bit of grip, but again, I'm not really seeing anybody else do this. So it's really cool to see this kind of milling on the knife. And as you can see here, the milling actually isn't just on the outside, it's also on the inside as well. And this leads to some interesting design choices that have been made on some critical parts of the knife. For example, if you take a look at this backspacer here, you can see that the backspacer has then had to have been, had to have this portion right here cut around to showcase that ball milling. And again, this is on both sides, so this is definitely deliberate. And again, it just really goes to show how much thought has been put into this design. As you can see, the ball milling is here on the top as well, near the flipper tab. And also, it's a little bit hard to see if we can capture in the right light, but the lock bar insert too also is, cut around that ball dimpling. Just a really cool thing. Very interesting. So taking a look at the front of the handle, the two screws here, these are again custom division screws, which are seeing a lot of use recently. It's available first on the Neons. Now you're seeing on here as well. It does mean that, without this bit is not being sold by the workshop. You can't really open this knife to service it. You're gonna have to send it back to service it if you want to do any deep cleaning, which is unfortunate. But again, I think, again, this is just trying to show off the, level of detail, showing off that they do everything in-house. So you're starting to see these screws pop a little more often. I do hope at some point they'll eventually sell the bit to open this knife up separately, but at the moment really probably isn't going to be anytime soon. But let's see what else we have here. Yeah, the screws are blind screwed, so it means that you have a very clean handle profile on the outside. Just that beautiful silk milling and that blue pivot collar for that extra pop of color. Now lastly, moving on to the back spacer, we have a long groove that starts off shallow and then runs deeper. Really cool accent. I haven't seen many grooved back spacers like this from the workshop, so I think this might be one of the first times that they've used this design. You can see the lanyard loop is integrated into the back spacer as well, very typical with relief milling on both sides of the handles. So that's pretty much an overview of some of the features of this knife. Last thing, of course, like any other Shirogorov knife, the inside is fully internally milled, and there actually is even some light milling on the lock bar itself, which is pretty cool. Very interesting. So moving on to a couple of questions and concerns that people have had about this knife, since it's been a very anticipated collaboration. One of the first things that people ask is just how does it flip? As you can see here, the flipper tab is actually not that big. And really, I think this was kind of a missed mark. One of the cool things about Lee Williams knives is they have such a big honking flipper tab. And personally, I don't think that they need to be that big, but having that tab kind of disappear when the knife is open is really what makes the Kickstop mechanism so magical, I think. And so when you have such a small flipper tab that kind of hides away, you're kind of thinking, well, maybe the flipper tab is actually still there. Like the Pero knife, that has such a minuscule flipper tab that when the knife is open, the knife is designed in such a way where that tab is hidden. So I really feel like you're not really getting that full effect of that Kickstop mechanism. And also I think that flipper tab being so small presents a couple of problems. Some people have had trouble opening the knife, and really I think that is not only due to the size of the flipper tab, but also the positioning as well. And this issue was also very prevalent on the Pero. And to really showcase this, let's take a look at some other knife designs. We have an F95 style knife and a Neon, and you can see that relative to where the pivots are on the knives, the flipper tab on most of Sergey's designs is pretty much directly above the pivot, right? However, on the Kickstop, it's very much forward. And what does this mean? When you have a flipper tab that is, right above the pivot, I think that's optimal. You have a very good flipping action. You're able to, preload the flipper tab enough to get enough force to have that blade fly open. And of course, any of these knives are very easy to open. When you have the flipper tab behind the pivot, you're really having a knife that has a weak flip. Most of the knives I've seen with this design have a weak flip. One of Sugargrove model that comes into mind when I think of that is the jeans, which have historically had a weak flip. Also, the Russian Dr. Death, unfortunately, had the flipper tab behind the pivot. Now, on the 110 Kickstop, it's pretty much the opposite. Like the Pero, the flipper tab is very much forward of the pivot. What this means is you can preload the pivot with immense force, and if you're not flipping it in the correct way, you're pretty much going to have your finger basically slip off the tab. That's hard to say. But if you don't, you have a really satisfying flip. Like, take a look at how hard this thing flips open. Like, it's crazy. This thing flips open like crazy. And it's not like I can't flip a neon either. But, you just preload this tab so much and the blade just flies out. So if you know how to flip this knife, it's very satisfying. But if you don't know, or, you haven't flipped it enough to get the hang of it, it can be really frustrating. And I've actually heard from a lot of people that opening it with I'm a lefty, so it's natural for me, but opening it with the left hand for some right-handed people is actually easier. Some tips that I've learned is, again, you don't want your finger on the lock bar. So if you want to get enough leverage up front here, so I like to hold the knife with my thumb on the pivot, and you pretty much just want to flip back like this. Flip back like this and kind of let your pointer finger kind of ride the handle like that. So again, a lot of people are having difficulty flipping this. The Blade Show prototype actually had an even smaller flipper tab, which was fortunately rectified by the time the production prototype came out. So I think that the flipper tab is a real weak point here. For many people, not for me, but again, I don't want to say that I'm like some kind of master at flipping these knives, but I can definitely see how it can be a problem for some people. Now, another thing that I definitely have noticed with this knife is that the detent ball is actually set very far back on the knife. It's definitely hard to see here, but as you can see let's take a look here at like an F95 style knife. This is the amount of distance you have from, fully open to hitting the detent ball. It's very short. And once you hit that detent ball, the lock bar rises and then the blade basically rides on the detent ball. With this knife, however, this is, from open, this is the amount of distance you have until the blade hits the detent ball. It's a lot of motion. And so again, with that lack of a flipper tab, you really have to be careful about closing this knife quickly, because it can, once that detent ball rises up on top of that blade, it's pretty much just going to fall shut on you. And if you don't have a good sense of when that's going to happen, you can be, kind of flicking this knife closed and then having the blade just fall on your fingers, and you're probably going to have a bad time. So I think that was necessary to kind of get the whole flipper tab shape and everything worked out. They did an excellent job with that, actually. As you can see here, the flipper tab is perfectly contoured with the handle, which again, when open, is just completely hidden, which is really awesome, I think. But again, having such a long distance between the blade tang and the blade and the pivot, or the detent ball, is really unpredictable, and something that is very unusual compared to other Sugargrove knives. What this also means too is that when the knife is not riding on, in that period of time when the blade is, in this area of not riding on the pivot ball, this blade is actually contacting the lock bar insert, and it's basically rubbing on the lock bar insert itself. Again, the knife is satin finish, so you don't really get that much grittiness, but it definitely is, you want that detent ball on the blade as soon as possible when you're closing the knife. So again, this is not something that you can see, but it's interesting that that design choice had to be made when, coming up with this overall design for the knife. So again, it's weird because, I was saying so before that every facet of this design was well thought out, and well thought out in the sense that it was very deliberated on. I think that area, again, had to, some compromises had to be made to get this amazing design, which, again, similar to what happened with the Russian Dr. Death and the flipper tab, I think that, nothing, everything has limitations. So just some things that I notice about the design for this knife. Otherwise, I think it's amazing. I think it's, in short, a very, very worthy upgrade to the 110 design. Again, I think it's a really good choice that they went with this knife. And there's just a lot of really cool features here that we're seeing in a collaboration. A lot of people, I feel like we're getting tired of the carbon fiber collaboration, so kind of having something in full titanium was, I think, the right thing to do. And I hope that the next collaboration will also, be a full metal knife. But overall, again, some really cool points. Some really cool points that make it different than other Shirogravv knives. Just a couple of, weird design choices. Some things that I wish that they could have done, mostly relating to the pivot system. But overall, I think it's a really awesome collab. And if you're a fan of Lee's work and also Sergey's work, this is definitely a worthy piece to pick up. And if you won the lottery, then I hope that you'll enjoy the knife. And if you didn't, then I believe that there's still going to be an Anchor Gray one at the time of me filming this video. So definitely go ahead and check that one out and enter it if that color is to your liking. Otherwise, I'm sure there's some people who will be selling these on secondary, hopefully for not too much of an inflated price. But again, this is a really cool knife to have, and I think for a Shirogravv collector, this one will be here for quite a long time. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.